Fucking killing me.
A show created by the fans, for the fans. We are your home for Ohio State football coverage all year long. The Scarlet and Gray Podcast, a Network 216 production. Live weekdays on the Network 216 YouTube channel. Send us all your questions and comments on Twitter at @VSG_podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Tyler Johnson, Jordan Dalton, and Nick Leisure.
Hello, Buckeye Nation, and welcome to today's episode of the Scarlet and Gray Podcast, your Ohio State versus Indiana game day preview. I am Tyler Johnson, joined by Jordan Dalton, Nick Leisure. Gentlemen, how are you doing on this fine, snowy day?
Doing great. I'm bundled up, a little warm. Trying to stay warm at least. It's cold, and the snow is falling finally. So feeling like the football season's winding down, but we're getting in the home stretch.
Yeah. Most important football is ahead of us now, so can't hold anything back.
Yep, for sure. There's plenty to talk about. Again, Ohio State versus Indiana game day preview. There was some breaking news that came out of the Woody yesterday. We're going to talk about all of it. Before we do, guys, just take a quick second, if you would. Drop a like on the video. Subscribe if you are brand new to the channel. Again, we're trying to push for 3,000 subscribers, and every subscription helps. Completely free to subscribe. The show will also be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you are unable to watch on YouTube. So, gentlemen, I'm just going to start with it's part of the game day preview, honestly, because it's a huge loss for Ohio State right before this game. Center Seth McLaughlin has it came out last night that he suffered torn Achilles. He is out for the season. First off, just absolutely brutal for Seth. Thoughts and prayers go to him, and hopefully he has a speedy recovery. He's had an incredible season so far coming over from Alabama. He actually, it sounds like, according to Draft Scouts, is playing his way into being potentially the first center taken in the draft. But what are your guys' some of your initial thoughts now that we've had some time to kind of digest this a little bit?
That's pretty unfortunate.
Especially
with how he was playing. He really was the anchor to that offensive line this year, and was the reliable one that, through all the changes, was the one that was kind of holding that line steady, and he was essentially the one that was calling out a lot of our blitzes, and he's just been playing incredible. He was kind of the underrated transfer that we had this year. Didn't get talked about a lot. Wasn't flashy like a Caleb Downs or any of those other guys that came in. But he just put his head down, went to work, and he's been the model of consistency for this offense. So the fact that he went down on a non-contact injury at practice, leading up to another top 5 matchup, you just can't help but feel for the guy and then feel for the team, because I know those guys on the offensive line really looked up to him. So, like you said, thoughts and prayers to Seth, and hopefully he does have a speedy recovery, because he's going to be a heck of a football player at the next level.
Yeah, I got nothing, man. Jordan hit that right on the head, dude. It just sucks.
Sucks.
That is the plain and simple fact. It sucks. Sucks for him. Sucks for the team. Sucks for us. Just sucks all the way around.
Yeah, I remember I was texting you guys last night, and I was like, strong rumors coming out that Seth McLaughlin suffered a severe injury, and we're kind of just waiting there for about an hour or so. And the Columbus Dispatch report, I want to say at like 10 o'clock last night, that they confirmed the reports that he ended up suffering the injury. So it's definitely really unfortunate. It's a situation where a guy really didn't have a good season in Alabama last year, had some issues snapping, had a great season with Ohio State, really played his way into, like I said, being a mid-round draft pick. So you hope he recovers. I think the other thing that Ryan Day said coming out of this that's pretty awesome is Seth McLaughlin is going to basically be like a coach for the offensive linemen as well, to help out Justin Fry a little bit. So that's also just the fact that McLaughlin, I mean, we saw him the other day. He was actually, after practice, he still ended up on a scooter. Like, he was still there around his teammates. So you love to see that. You really do, because as much as what he's going through, it's great just having him around the team because he's such an impact as a leader. But now, guys, Ohio State has lost their 2 best offensive linemen. You lose Josh Simmons for the year at left tackle. You lose Seth McLaughlin for the year at center. And the way they're going to adjust the offensive line moving forward, Carson Hinsman, he's going to move back to center after playing left guard, taking over from Donovan Jackson. And now Austin Sierveld, I'm probably pronouncing that name incorrectly, he is going to take over at left guard. So that's kind of what we're looking at. But that kind of brings us into Indiana coming to town. Now, Indiana has not played anybody this year, but one thing about Indiana that's pretty underrated, I would say, about their team is their defense is pretty good. I mean, they are led by Mikel Kamara, who has 9.5 sacks this year. So how do you guys feel about this offensive lineman now? Again, knowing what they've gone through, how do you feel about this offensive line going up against this defensive front from Indiana? A lot of people say Indiana hasn't played anybody. And, of course, they haven't played a lot. They haven't played any ranked opponents, and that is true. But the numbers on defense also speak for themselves. We have not seen Indiana defense like this really ever since, I mean, we've been Ohio State fans, perform the way that they are performing this year.
It's definitely concerning, but at the same time, I feel like they're really going to lean in on the run game. And if you're gonna hide a deficiency on the offensive line, it's definitely easy to do that by just running the football. You know, if you just put hat on a hat, you don't got to worry about calling out blitz protection or pass protection, anything like that. You just line up, go man on man, and just dominate the opposing defensive line. So I think they're really going to – I mean, I feel like that's been the recipe all year long is they're going to run the football, you know. So I'm not overly concerned. Obviously losing a center is a lot harder to handle than losing a tackle just because of the center's responsibilities outside of just snapping the ball, you know. But I'm not overly concerned. It's definitely concerning, but I think they'll be fine. They'll get a rhythm. It happened on Tuesday, so they've had a couple days to kind of digest it and kind of get a game plan together. So I think they'll be ready to roll.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a next man up situation. We've seen it all year. The offensive line has responded. And it's just, you know, we've won I saw it a lot this week on social media or the last couple of days. We won a national title with their string quarterback. And so I think having that next man up mentality is just what needs to happen. And I think they're going to perform.
Yeah, I think, again, the biggest thing is with Kamara, he is a force when it comes to getting after the quarterback. 9.5 sacks, I don't care you're still playing against Big Ten level competition. The fact he's got 9.5 sacks is incredible. CJ West, I know they brought him in from the transfer portal. They brought in actually a decent amount of transfers. So Indiana's defense, they have played well so far. Now you look at Ohio State and on the offensive side of the ball, what do you think Chip Kelly is going to do? How do you think he's going to scheme this up again, knowing Carson Hinsman does have experience at center, so that does help. But again, still battling a lot of injury on the offensive line. Donovan Jackson still new at left tackle. How do you think he's going to scheme this up against Indiana?
I think, like Nick said, a lot of run. I think there's going to be a lot of moving the ball outside to the receivers. Just getting the ball out quick for Will Howard and taking that pressure off the offensive line. So I could see a lot of quick RPO things to the outside, setting up wide receiver screens, stuff like that, especially early on to get a rhythm going for the offense. I don't think it's going to be a priority to have those long developing pass plays early in the game. And who knows, we could come out, take a couple shots downfield. But I think to establish the run is going to be a huge key for Ohio State. It's actually going to be a huge key for Indiana as well. But I think whoever can win the trenches this game is going to win it all. You know, we're going to get into it a little bit, but Indiana presents some challenges that we haven't really seen this year. So it's going to be a good matchup. It's something that we didn't expect coming into this season.
That's for sure.
Yeah, I agree. It's Indiana again. Kurt Cignetti has done a fantastic job with this program, and yeah, I know a lot of people are quick to say, "Well, look at who they play in their schedule. They're still winning the games." I mean, in years past, Indiana wouldn't win these games. Like they just wouldn't. Indiana was normally a bottom feeder Big Ten program. He comes in year one and he immediately has them at 10-0 and on the verge of potentially, even if they lose this game, making the college football playoffs. So just an incredible job that he's done. And I do agree. I think you got to quick passes on the perimeter in this game. Again, I think the offensive line will be okay, but I still think, again, with Donovan Jackson especially, I mean, he's still, when he doesn't have help in some passing situations, he does struggle, which is very common considering that's not the position he's played for majority of his career. So I do think they're going to try and use a lot of quick game, and then hopefully what that does is you can open it up down the field a little bit. But I wouldn't be surprised if they even don't take a lot of deep shots in this game just to kind of get the offensive line comfortable. Because again, that's really important because one of Indiana's strengths is that defensive line, and the team that you play next week obviously has one of the best defensive lines in the country. So I think it'd be a good momentum boost to just get these guys comfortable, get them used to playing together. Because that's the other thing, guys, that people don't talk about. The offensive line is also very difficult because offensive linemen get used to playing with one another. Like there's a lot they have to do to get used to playing with one another. Like you mentioned it, Seth McLaughlin makes all the line calls. So now Carson Hinsman's going to be doing that. It's another voice. So it is just another thing to watch on the offensive line. But
yeah.
All right, guys. So now the Ohio State defense coming into this game, Indiana, quarterback Curtis Rourke has played, no short of fantastic. He's got 2,400 yards, 21 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He's been sacked 10 times. That is one of the weaknesses of Indiana is their offensive line. It is not very good. Rourke is not a guy that's going to necessarily beat you very much with his legs, if at all. I know he had the run against Michigan on a read option to seal a win, but that's just not his strength. When you guys look at this Indiana offense, it begins and ends with Curtis Rourke, but what do you see when you look at these guys? Because what it looks like to me, balance, balance, balance.
Actually, I would argue that the passing game is their strength, and the only reason I say that is because they run RPOs like no other team in college football. They are I believe the highest percentage of RPOs run this year in college football. Curtis Rourke has been excellent in knowing when to pull the ball, when to hand the ball, and he's just been making great decisions all year. And I think that's where the challenge for this Ohio State defense is going to come from, because we haven't really played a team that's run a lot of RPOs. Oregon's kind of the only team that's really done it effectively. And Indiana's going to do it every single play. I almost guarantee you that every single play is going to have a run pass option. And if you just look at the stats, how they disperse the ball, I think balance is a good word for it. You're talking one running back, two running backs in the backfield. They have Ellison and Lawton. They both have over 100 carries, both have over 500 yards rushing, and both average around 5 yards a carry. And then their wide receivers, they've got 5 guys over 25 receptions this year. And their tight end has about 17 catches, 150 yards. So they get it to a lot of different guys offensively. And so there's not really one guy you can key on. And that's, I think, where this Ohio State defense has to stay sound in their assignments. There's not going to be a lot of blitzing in this game, because you're going to have to stay manned up, because there's an opportunity for if you run an RPO and you send a guy on the blitz and Rourke pulls that ball and makes that throw, that's a touchdown. And so Ohio State's going to have to play really conservative. They're going to have to make tackles in this game. And I think that's where a lot of teams have struggled against Indiana this year, is they don't turn the ball over. and they're able to move that ball down the field. And Rourke's just been making the right decision every time they get the football, and that's why you see him hanging up 40 points a game.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at Indiana too, I think the other big thing is, like, with what Rourke is doing, and again, RPOs, like, people think that, okay, well, that's pretty easy. Obviously, it's a short, easy throw. You also have to have a guy that can make the right read, and his experience, I mean, has really just turned around Indiana this entire program, which is really kind of incredible to see, especially a guy coming from the MAC and playing quarterback in the Big Ten, and really not skipping a beat whatsoever. I think you talked about, JD, when you looked at their wide receivers, that's kind of my biggest concern. The Buckeyes secondary has been kind of spotty this year, and this is a group that when people think of Indiana, you're like, okay, well, they're not super talented. Like, you can look at the stats. They haven't really played anybody. But I'll tell you what, with all the balance they have, there's not one guy. Like, they don't have a Jeremiah Smith, for instance. They don't have a guy like that that's just going to get probably 1,000 yards receiving. They don't have that type of guy. It's everybody. That's my biggest concern, is the secondary. And in particular, of course, Denzel Burke. That one really worries me because, again, we talked about it on our episode earlier this week. Again, if you haven't seen that, make sure you tune in. It's available on all platforms. But Denzel Burke has consistently gotten beat down the field. And one thing Rourke is one of the best at in college, and I mean all of college football, not even just the Big Ten. He is one of the best in just putting it right in the bucket. Those bucket passes on the sideline. He is one of the best quarterbacks in the country at doing that. And that's where Denzel Burke has struggled the most. So for me, that's my biggest worry with this Buckeye defense, is the secondary. Because this secondary, we've talked about him all year long, okay? There's a lot of hype around him. Everyone's coming back senior year, like BIA, best in America. If you are the best in America, you better come and show it on Saturday, or else Rourke is going to have an absolute field day. It's the type of game that if Indiana somehow wins, then he should be in the Heisman conversation. So
I think less on the secondary, more on the front four. I think the front four are the most important part of the defense this week, because if he can sit back there and we're not blitzing anybody, he can just sit back there and not feel pressure, any of that. I feel like the front four just has to find a way to create pressures. Even if they're not getting sacks, they have to make Rourke uncomfortable early by only bringing four. Because like you said, we're not going to be able to blitz a lot because they're just so good at finding the right matchups. They're finding the right one-on-ones. We're not going to be able to blitz. We're going to have this pressure from the front four, and I really need Jack Sawyer and JTT to really – they just need to play their game, dude. Like, I need a Penn State type game out of JTT this week and really create havoc, because he just – to be honest, both of them have just been kind of underwhelming for them both deciding to come back this year. They've been underwhelming, and I'm wondering if we're going to see CJ Hicks at that jack position again this week, like we did last week. That'd be something interesting to throw at him, because it's a little bit more of an athlete, kind of bringing pressure off the edge. But I don't know, man. The secondary is definitely a concern, but that front four just has to find a way to create pressures.
Yeah.
Where are you guys at with CJ Hicks? Like, Jim Knowles is saying the right things, okay?
He's a great
like
pass
Ryan
rusher.
Day is. Are we actually – like, this is where I'm at. I can't believe it. Like, I can't believe what he's saying until I'm starting to see it more. Like, seeing it one game doesn't really do any – like, in garbage time doesn't really do it for me. Like, he said we're going to do it more. Okay. This is a great opportunity to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that it's not just what we've seen in the past. Like, oh, yeah, CJ Hicks, like, we're going to make sure we get this guy involved more. Are we actually going to do it, or is it just more of just same old, same old? That's what I'm wondering with CJ Hicks. Because I think he's talented. There's no doubt. I think he's a great pass rusher. We've seen it. Are they actually going to use him? That's the big question. I feel like.
I hope. I brought it up. I hope so.
Yeah.
I just feel like he's just too good of an athlete, dude. You got to find a way to get him involved at some point. And
also, what's incredible, I shared this stat with you guys yesterday, but I'm sure a lot of people haven't even saw it yet. The top quarterback in the country when under pressure, Curtis Rourke. 90.6 overall PFF grade, which
that's why we're not going to blitz a lot, like Jordan said.
We're not going to blitz.
Yeah, you're not going to. I mean, and then the question is, like, if you do bring on CJ Hicks, are you sending him on in a blitz situation? Are you taking off JT or Jack Sawyer? It's going to be curious to see how they do all that, because one thing that Larry Johnson doesn't like to do, it seems like, is if it's a pass rushing situation, he does not take JT or Jack Sawyer off the field. Yeah. But it's like these guys, both of them, man, and Nick, you kind of talked about it. Throughout their careers, these are guys that – and I'm not saying just because you're a 5-star you need to, like, get 10 sacks a year. But these guys have never been productive when it comes to getting sacks.
Not
it's been the most – it's so infuriating. Like, you see the pass rush, like the pressure stat. Okay, that's not a sack, though. Like, if you want to be successful and make money at the NFL level consistently, you have to be able to actually get to the quarterback and get him to the ground. So it's going to be really interesting to see this defense against Indiana's offense. But the final thing kind of talk about, and then we'll kind of just give our predictions on this game, guys. Both teams, of course, are ranked in the top 5 in the college football playoff as of right now. Whoever loses this game, do you think they are still a lock for the college football playoff? Or do you think it's a situation where they would need help in order to get in? Like, because that's a huge debate right now. Like, if Indiana loses, does that mean that they have no chance to get in over a potential 3-loss SEC team? Or Ohio State or Indiana, whoever loses this game, do you think they still get into the college football playoff?
I think if Ohio State loses, I feel like they're not a lock for the playoff. Honestly,
I think we could sneak in, but
I think we'd be like a 10 or a.
It also depends on how bad we lose this game.
Like, yeah, if we get blown out, I think they could definitely see us knocked out of the top 12.
Yeah,
because it's at home. You know,
you're not going to play a conference championship.
Yeah, no conference title game anymore. Like, which in all real, I mean, that'd almost be the best path for them to not have to play Oregon again. To be honest, I think. Yeah. But I don't know, man. I think if Indiana loses this game and it's like a close game, they certainly are still alive to make the playoff. I think.
Okay.
But yeah, if the Buckeyes somehow lose this game, I'm not saying they're a lock by any means.
I can't say they're a lock either.
It's so tough because again, this was a huge talking point, and since we just have now seen the rankings after, because it comes out after our show ends, you look at it, and if Indiana loses, I think it kind of depends on what they – personally, I think they should still be in, especially if they win out. But it's knowing just that there seems to be an SEC bias that they're willing to put in one of those teams, even though they might have 3 losses, because they'll deem it their strength of schedule is harder.
Exactly.
But that's tough because a team like Indiana, let's say they lose to Ohio State by – that's their only loss this year, and you're going to keep them out. I understand they don't have technically any big wins because you can't call Michigan a big win anymore at this point in the season. So I think the whole thing with that, I really hope whoever loses this game doesn't get screwed out of a spot, because personally, again, Ohio State's only loss is by 1 point to the number one ranked team in the country. And let's say they lose to Indiana by 3, hypothetically, okay? Let's say they lose to Indiana by 3, and Indiana's right now is a top 5 team. I don't know how you keep them out. You're going to tell me that they can put in a 3-loss SEC team over a 2-loss Ohio State, that their 2 losses are to 2 top 5 teams within less than 5 points combined. Like, to me, that's just – that would be you want to have some controversy, that'll cause some controversy if they do that.
And then you have Penn State sitting there at 4, who we've already beaten.
Yeah.
Like, what do you do with those teams, right?
Yeah.
It's
if Ohio State loses, it's definitely not a lock in my eyes, because I feel like
I think Ohio State has a better chance of making it if they lose than Indiana does.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
Just because of that victory over Penn State.
On the road.
Yeah.
I completely forgot Penn. Dude,
you just don't in the country.
We could have 4, Big Ten teams get in, hypothetically.
I'm sure they would love that.
But to be fair, dude, I feel like they'd probably put a 3-loss team in over a 1-loss Indiana team from the SEC.
They'd rather have
a 3-loss Bama team playing on national television than a 1-loss Indiana team.
That is
TV shows, dude, bro.
Yeah,
dude, bro.
It is.
They're just trying to make the most amount of money, which sucks, But I mean, more people are going to watch Alabama play BYU than Indiana BYU.
So you're saying if Indiana loses to a number 2 Ohio State, they're going to drop below a 2-loss Ole Miss, a 2-loss Georgia, a 2-loss Tennessee,
potentially
with 1 loss.
Blown out, I could understand.
If we blow them out, potentially. If they lose a close game, then it's going to be hard.
That.
Yeah, but
But the SEC just cannibalizes itself every year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's wild to me.
I don't know, man.
Just like again, the other thing it's kind of nice we can talk about the playoff now. We actually see it. The fact that you look at it and Boise State now gets a bye, which is I don't understand it, and I'll tell you what. I don't know if the bracket lines up the way it looks. I don't know if you want that number 1 seed as of right now. Like that number 1 seed, it sounds so great, but it looks like a death trap right now. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this shakes out. And guys, Ohio State, 13.5-point favorite in this game. Again, it's a big noon kickoff at the Shoe. Funny enough, this big noon kickoff, the number 1 quarterback in the 2026 class, Jared Curtis, was supposed to attend this game, but due to his high school playoff game and the Buckeye game starting at noon, he will not be able to attend now. So that's fun. Shout out Fox for that. But anyway, huge game. Arguably I'll say 3rd biggest game of the year because Oregon's still number 1. Penn State, I think, is still number 2. But this is the biggest game probably in Indiana's school history. I think that's fair to say.
Never had a 5 matchup in the regular season. They've never been 11-0.
Everything's at stake for them. Everything.
They've never been 10-0. So they've already had the best season in school history. They've only played in 14 bowl games in their school history.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They haven't beat Ohio State in almost 20 years. There's a lot at stake for Indiana in this football game.
Yeah, absolutely. 13.5-point favorites the Buckeyes are. So whoever wants to take the floor first, do the Buckeyes cover 13.5? Which, again, that's quite a spread, I'll just be honest. But not only that, do they cover? And also, what's your score prediction?
Ohio State, 31. Indiana, 17. They barely cover. They get right to that 14-point threshold. They win, and they cover. 31-17.
I have a spread of 21 points, 35-14, Ohio State. I don't think it's close. I honestly don't think this is going to be a tough game for Ohio State.
Come on, TJ. Bring the party down.
I will say, hold on.
I'm not going to predict us to lose. So don't. When you say, okay.
I got one thing to say. Indiana's going to come out in this game and they're going to throw the kitchen sink at us. They're going to run every trick play they've got. They're going to pull every stop in the book to try to get this game early, get the momentum early. Chris Signetti, he is not afraid to play against the big dogs. This team's going to come in here ready to play. They've got 27 transfers. Most of them are from James Madison, brought with Kirk Signetti. They call themselves the Group 5 All-Stars because most of their transfers are from Group 5.
I love that.
It's kind of dope, actually, for real.
Yeah, they have a chip on their shoulder. Every game this year, they basically had this conversation. Every fan base says, they're overrated. They're not as good as, they look on paper. They haven't beaten anybody, and they just keep winning. So I don't think this is going to be an easy game. But I do think Ohio State has the talent. They have the roster. And I think that we're going to get it done at home.
Okay. All right. I like it. Well, the only thing I'm going to say to bring down the mood is I just don't think we cover that spread. We're going to win this game. I just don't think Ohio State covers that spread. I have in this game, I think the defense is going to struggle a little bit, especially at first, because that's the Ohio State special is for whatever reason, start off games slow. And I just have, this is the one game you can't, but I just have a feeling that'll happen. So Indiana will get some points. But I think, again, the defense will end up showing up a little bit. They'll get the Curtis Ruar, at least get to him a little bit, and hopefully sack him. He doesn't take a lot of sacks, so that's been pretty impressive for a guy that's not very mobile.
They've only given up 11 sacks on the year.
Yeah, I think the majority of them were actually against Michigan, if I'm correct on that one. Maybe a third of them that he's taken this year were against Michigan. So I thought that was interesting. But I do think Indiana is going to put up some points in this game. I do. I think they're a very good offense. It's going to be, in my opinion, the second best offense Ohio State has seen this year. Penn State, it's not. It's literally Tyler Warren. That's their entire offense. Indiana's a lot more balanced. Oregon is the best offense we face. But I have Ohio State 38, Indiana 27. So I think Indiana is going to score a little bit of points in this game, but we'll see, guys. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's quite a prep for the game next weekend, of course. So, but everyone, thank you for joining us for this Ohio State versus Indiana game day preview. Please drop a like on the video if you would. Help that YouTube algorithm grow for the channel. Subscribe if you are brand new. Again, 2 episodes per week. Want to make sure you don't miss any of it. And the show is always available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We will talk to you guys all again soon. As always, go Buckeyes.